All right, so for this deep dive, you sent us a transcript this time, and it's from the Learn English podcast video by Leon Gwen.
Yeah.
And it's called, 15-minute daily English language learning routine.
Right.
And so that's what we're diving deep into today is this 15-minute plan.
Mm-hmm.
And, our mission today is to extract, like all the really good stuff that we can, for you, the listener, to make your English learning, journey, as they say, feel more manageable and, most importantly, make it consistent.
Absolutely. And what really stood out to me when I was looking at this video is how it speaks to a feeling I think many of us have experienced, right?
Yeah.
Which is like that desire to learn something new.
Mm.
But life gets in the way and you have this big goal and it can feel overwhelming,
Yeah.
when you're juggling so many other things. And they really zero in on a solution that at first glance seems almost too simple,
Right.
but holds a lot of potential power.
Yeah. It's like kind of like deceptively simple, right? You look at it and you're like, oh, 15 minutes. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But it's more about like the consistency of it.
Exactly.
So, the core challenge that they're addressing, I think, is that feeling that a lot of people have of, I want to improve my English,
Right.
but where do I even find the time?
Yeah.
And so often that just leads to, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You end up not studying at all because the thought of dedicating, hours to grammar or memorizing, tons and tons of vocabulary, it just feels impossible to fit into your day.
And that's where I think their central idea really shines, which is this structured 15-minute daily routine.
Yeah.
And as we go through this, you'll see, how effective this approach can be. It's not so much about the intensity. It's about consistency. It's about building a habit,
Okay, so let's get right into this plan. They start off with the warm-up.
Okay.
And they recommend about 3 minutes for this. Now, when you think of warm-up, you're probably thinking,
like exercise.
like physical exercise.
Right.
But, they have a different take on it.
They do. They focus on vocabulary.
Yeah.
So the idea here is to select and work with 5 new words each day.
5 words.
Yeah.
Okay, now for you, the listener out there, you might be thinking, why only 5?
Right.
Why not like 10 or 20?
Why not more?
Why not try to learn as many as possible, right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Wouldn't that speed up your progress?
And, they actually refer to psychologist Miller's famous study, which suggests that our short-term memory can effectively handle around 5 to 9 new pieces of information at any one time.
Oh, so there's kind of a
limit.
There's a limit.
Okay.
Yeah. So 5 words, you're kind of right in the sweet spot there.
So what do you think happens if you go beyond that limit?
If you try to cram in,
you overload.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah, you overload. And they actually mention this. You risk burnout.
Right.
You might feel like you're making progress initially, but in the long run, that information is not going to stick.
Right. So it's better to learn a few things well.
Exactly.
Than to try to learn, a ton of things poorly.
It's like packing for a hike.
Okay.
The lighter your pack, the further you can go.
Yeah, less is more.
Without, straining yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, 5 words. You've got your 3 minutes.
Right.
How do they recommend you actually learn these words?
Okay, so they recommend a simple but really effective 3-step process.
Okay.
First, you write the word down.
Okay.
Second, you say it out loud.
Okay.
And third, you use it in a simple sentence.
Okay, so writing it down makes sense,
Yeah.
That's good for the visual learners.
Visual learners.
Saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Gets your mouth involved.
Gets those muscles working.
Yeah. But why use it in a sentence?
Well, they actually cite Nation's study here, which shows that using words and sentences helps you really nail down their meanings and understand how they function in different contexts.
Yeah, so it's one thing to just know the definition.
Just see the word.
In isolation.
But it's a whole other thing to actually use it
right.
in a sentence correctly.
Exactly.
And they give an example too, right?
They do. They use the word journey.
Okay.
So you would write down journey, say journey out loud.
Journey.
And then create a sentence like, I'm excited for my journey to the mountains or something like that. Yeah, something simple, but it reinforces that meaning.
Okay, so you're just starting out. Where do you find these 5 words every day?
Well, they have some suggestions for that.
Okay.
Apps like Quizlet are great.
Okay.
They have lots of lists. organized by, topic.
Yeah. Or proficiency level and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And they also mention, the old-fashioned vocabulary book.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It can provide structured lists and things like that.
Okay, cool. So you got that warm up.
All right.
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
5 words.
5 words.
Write it. Say it. Use it.
Yeah, keep it simple.
All right, so that brings us to the next step.
Okay.
Which is listening practice.
Listening practice, yeah. And they recommend about 4 minutes for this.
4 minutes. Okay, now for you, beginners out there listening can sometimes feel...
Oh, yeah.
Daunting.
Very, very daunting.
Because it's just like a constant stream of words, and a lot of them you don't understand.
It can feel overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah, so how do they suggest you tackle that?
So what they say is you don't need to try and hang on every single word you hear.
Okay.
Okay.
So you don't need to understand every single word?
You don't have to understand everything, no.
Okay.
Just try to get the general gist.
The gist, okay.
Yeah, the main idea.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like, have you ever been in a conversation where you didn't understand every word?
Right.
But you still kind of got the point?
Right.
Yeah, that's your brain.
Your brain's filling in the gaps.
Filling in the gaps, yeah.
So you're not striving for perfect understanding at the very beginning.
Not at all. And they talk about the CR input hypothesis here.
Oh, yeah.
Which essentially means listening to content that's just slightly above your current level.
Okay.
Can actually help you improve.
Okay.
It forces your brain to work a little harder.
So it's like a workout.
It's like a workout for your brain. Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of materials do they recommend?
Okay. So they recommend short audio content.
Okay.
Podcasts are a good option.
Mm-hmm.
They specifically mentioned BBC Learning English.
Okay.
And ESL Pod.
Mm-hmm.
As good resources.
Okay.
They often feature, conversational language, which is helpful.
Right.
And then for the music lovers out there, they say start with slower songs.
Okay.
Something like Imagine by John Lennon.
Yeah.
Where the lyrics are generally a little easier to follow.
Okay. And the key here seems to be that it should be short and manageable, right?
Exactly.
So you don't want to try to listen to an hour-long lecture.
Yeah, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, as they say.
Now, speaking of biting off more than you can chew, they actually broke down some of the key vocabulary.
They did, yeah.
That they use in the video.
Right.
And I thought this might be helpful for you, the listener, to go over this.
Absolutely.
So just so you understand these phrases.
Yeah.
So first we have burnout.
Burnout.
And that means, to become extremely tired.
Yeah, exhausted.
Exhausted, yeah. Especially from overworking.
Right.
So, for example, if you don't take breaks in your English study routine, you might burn out from the pressure.
Exactly.
Okay, so then they mentioned nail down.
Nail down.
And that means to successfully complete or clarify something.
Right.
So we need to nail down the details of this routine, for example.
Exactly.
Okay, then there's give something a shot.
Give something a shot.
Which means to try something often without knowing what the outcome will be.
Right.
So I've never tried learning English with just 15 minutes a day, but I'll give it a shot.
Exactly.
Okay, then there's hang on something.
Hang on something.
Which means to depend on something or wait for something important.
Right.
So you might be hanging on the results of your English proficiency test, for example.
That's a good one.
And then finally they had bite off more than one can chew.
Bite off more than you can chew.
Which means to take on more responsibility or tasks than you can handle.
Right.
So, for example, if you try to study English for hours every day when you don't have the time, you might be biting off more than you can chew.
Yeah. You're setting yourself up for failure at that point.
Okay, so I think going over those will really help.
It does. It gives you a much better understanding of
the context.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done the warm-up.
We've done the listening.
Listening. So what's next?
So the next step is speaking.
Speaking.
And they recommend another 4 minutes for this.
Okay, now this is the one that a lot of people find the most intimidating.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it involves actually, opening your mouth and
putting yourself out there.
Yeah, making sounds that are unfamiliar to you.
In a new language.
In a new language, yeah.
Yeah.
So what advice do they give for this?
Okay, so again, they emphasize keeping it simple.
Okay.
Okay, so they just recommend speaking out loud. To yourself, even.
Talking to yourself.
Talking to yourself, yeah.
Okay.
You can start by just, talking about your day. Answer some simple questions like, what did you do today?
Right.
What are your plans for tomorrow? Things like that.
So just getting into the habit of
It's about building a habit.
Yeah, just speaking.
Yeah, making it part of your routine.
And so, but how do you know if you're speaking correctly?
That's a great question.
If you're just speaking to yourself?
Right, because you don't have a teacher there to correct you.
Yeah, you don't have any feedback.
So their recommendation is to record yourself.
Record yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, I know that can be a little awkward.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Hearing your own voice.
Yeah.
But it can really be helpful
Okay.
in identifying mistakes,
Yeah, because you might not even realize you're pronouncing something.
Sometimes you think you're saying it right, but then you hear it back and you're like, oh,
yeah,
that's not how it's supposed to sound.
Okay.
And they mentioned research by Horowitz, who found that recording yourself not only helps you sharpen your pronunciation, but can also ease speaking anxiety.
Oh, wow.
Over time.
Okay, so the more you do it,
the more comfortable you become.
The less scary it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 4 minutes of speaking practice.
4 minutes of speaking.
Even if it's just talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, so after the speaking practice comes reading practice.
Reading practice.
And they recommend you dedicate about 2 minutes to this.
2 minutes. Okay, so this is a shorter section.
Yeah.
Compared to listening and speaking.
It is.
But it's still important, right?
Absolutely. It plays a very crucial role in your overall language development.
So reading is great for...
Your vocabulary.
Vocabulary.
Yeah, expanding your vocabulary, reinforcing your understanding of grammar.
Right. So what kind of reading do they suggest?
Okay, so they recommend reading a short paragraph.
Okay.
Okay, and...
keep it short.
Keep it short, yeah. Part of a book, a news article, a story from a language learning app.
Okay.
Like Duolingo.
So something that you can read within 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's the key.
Okay. And how should you approach the reading?
Okay, so they have a specific suggestion for this.
Okay.
And they say read aloud.
Read aloud?
Yes, read aloud.
Okay.
It helps you really get the hang of the sounds.
Okay. Of the English language.
So it's not just about reading silently.
No, it's about...
it's about actually making the sounds.
Connecting the written word with the spoken word.
Right. Okay. Now, what about when you come across words that you don't know?
Okay. Yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Should you stop and look up every word?
Right.
And their answer is no.
Okay.
Don't do that.
Okay.
They recommend just picking one or two unfamiliar words that really stand out to you.
Okay.
And add those to your vocabulary list.
Okay, so you're still building vocabulary, but you're not like constantly going to the dictionary.
Exactly, because that can be a real drag,
It can really slow you down.
It can, yeah.
Okay. So we've got the warm-up. We've got listening. Reading. And that brings us to the last 2 minutes.
The last 2 minutes.
So what do they recommend for the wrap-up?
Okay, so the final 2 minutes are dedicated to reflection and review.
And the main idea here is to help you consolidate what you've learned in those 15 minutes.
Okay, so how do they recommend you spend those 2 minutes?
All right, so they suggest you run through the words, the phrases, or the sentences that you practiced earlier. It's a quick little check.
Yeah, a little quiz?
A little quiz, yeah.
See if you remember.
See what you remember, yeah.
Okay.
And they also suggest you take a moment to think about, what was easy for you?
Yeah.
What was challenging?
Right.
What did you struggle with?
Right.
What felt natural?
Okay.
And they encourage personalization as well.
Okay.
So,
like making it relevant to you?
Make it relevant to your life.
Yeah.
Link it to your interests, your hobbies.
Right, because if you're learning words that you're actually going to use...
Exactly.
You're more likely to remember them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they also emphasize the importance of tracking your progress.
Yeah.
Whether you use a notebook or an app, seeing how far you've come.
It can be really motivating.
It's encouraging to see that you're actually...
It is, yeah. It shows you're actually making progress.
Yeah.
And they even suggest using a journal prompt.
Oh, a journal prompt. Okay.
Like, today I learned the word journey. I'll try to use it tomorrow when I talk about my weekend plans.
Oh, I see.
So just something to connect it to your life.
Right.
And make a commitment to actually using that word.
So you're not just learning it. You're actually going to use it.
Yeah.
In real life.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the big takeaway throughout this whole 15-minute routine is this idea of consistency.
Consistency is key.
Yeah, it's about sticking to the plan, even on those days when you're super busy.
Even if it's just for those 15 minutes,
But do it every day.
Do it every day.
Okay, so they also shared some additional phrases.
They did, yeah.
In the video, so let's go over those.
Okay.
So the first one was dive into something.
Dive into something. And that means for you to start something, with a lot of energy and enthusiasm.
With enthusiasm, yeah, like you're jumping into a pool.
Right. So, for example, I'm excited to dive into this new routine this weekend.
Exactly.
And then they talked about get the hang of something.
Get the hang of something.
Which means for you to learn how to do something or to become good at it.
Right. So it took me a while to get the hang of this 15-minute study plan.
Right.
But now it feels easier.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's stumble across something.
Stumble across something.
Which means to find something by chance or unexpectedly.
Right. You're not looking for it.
Yeah.
But you find it.
You just happen to find it.
Yeah. So you might stumble across a useful English learning website while browsing online.
Right. Yeah. Then there was look up something.
Look up something.
Which means to search for information about something.
Right. So if you don't know a word,
you
can look it up in a dictionary.
Right. Okay. And then finally we have run out of something.
Run out of something.
Which means to use all of something so that there is none left.
Yeah. There's nothing left.
So if you run out of time for your English study one day,
right,
don't worry, you can just try again tomorrow.
Try again tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, so that's all really useful vocabulary. So to recap the whole routine again.
Okay.
So we have the 3-minute warm-up.
3-minute warm-up.
5 new vocab words.
5 new vocab words.
Then we have 4 minutes of listening.
4 minutes of listening.
Focusing on the general idea.
General idea, not every word.
Not every word.
Right.
Then 4 minutes of speaking.
4 minutes of speaking.
Even if it's just to yourself.
To yourself.
And recording yourself.
Yeah.
Then 2 minutes of reading aloud.
2 minutes of reading aloud.
And then a 2-minute wrap-up.
2-minute wrap-up.
To review everything.
Review and reflect. Yeah.
And the key message here is that consistency, even in these short bursts, can really lead to significant progress.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Okay. So there you have it.
There you have it.
The 15-minute daily routine.
Yeah.
Inspired by Leo and Gwen.
From LEP.
And it really highlights how breaking down a big goal into smaller, more manageable steps can make a huge difference.
Oh, can.
Okay.
They can.
So this deep dive into Leo and Gwen's advice leaves us with a final thought for you.
Okay.
To consider. How could you apply this principle?
Right.
Of breaking down a big learning goal into small, consistent daily steps for you.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
What could you achieve?
What could you learn?
Yeah. What have you always wanted to learn? You know?
Right.
And how could you use this idea to get started and make real progress?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
See ya.